I think, letting people pay, letting people not have the worst thing they've ever done or the worst version of themselves be who they are forever. Like, we have to grant other people the same grace we would want and compassion that we'd want granted to ourselves.
Hey family, I'm really pumped about our guest today. We're blessed to have a woman with us whose story proves that it's not where you start, but where you journey that matters. Lara Love Hardin stepped out of prison and into her purpose, transformed herself from somebody who was facing 32 felony charges into the president of True Literary Agency and an Oprah's Book Club author. Laura's memoir, The Many Lives of Mama Love, is a testament to the power of second chances and the strength that lives in each of us. And through her work helping other writers bring their stories to life, she's advocating for prison reform. Laura shows us what's possible when someone decides to rewrite their own story. Enjoy our visit with this remarkable woman who reminds us that pressure really can forge diamonds. Hey, Miss Laura.
Hi.
I'm so excited to have you here. You know, your story is truly incredible and you just bring out the best in other people, but it's been a journey for you to do that. I was thinking, now in business and in life, our greatest transformations often come from our darkest moments. And your story proves this in ways that will stop a lot of people right in their tracks. As I'm sure you're going to stop a lot of our family who you're speaking to right now in their tracks. But let's go specifically because in 2008, after 15 years of addiction that had led to 32 felonies, everything from theft and bank fraud to stolen credit cards. You found yourself at what most people would consider rock bottom. I want you to take us back to 2008 and not just what happened, but to who you were then, and then help us to understand how that person who became the inspiring powerhouse you are today is talking with me from this position. It's a truly wonderful story, Laura.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an honor. Um, 16 years ago at this time, I was about to spend my first holiday, Thanksgiving, away from my children. So that time from 2008 feels very fresh right now. And it was definitely rock bottom. I think some of us have to learn things the hard way. And I think I'm one of those people. But I had struggled on and off with addiction. Specifically, I became addicted to prescription pain medication, like, millions of other people have. And I grew up, I never wrote in my diary or my vision board, I hope someday I can become addicted, or I hope someday I can commit felonies or hurt people I love or go to jail. I had none of those wishes. In fact, I thought I could, out educate myself from whatever afflicted my family, which was a lot of addiction and chaos. But I struggled on and off with addiction, and in 2007 relapsed after 6 years clean, and within 11 months had completely imploded my life. I was addicted. I went from prescription pain medication to smoking heroin. I lost my business. I had a very successful business. My home was getting foreclosed on. My cars were about to get repossessed. I was not showing up for my children. I had 4 children and 2 stepchildren. Completely imploded my life. And there was a pounding on the door. It was election day. It was Obama's election day, 2008. And I knew in that moment it was over. And I wanted it to be over. The nature of addiction is hard to explain if you haven't experienced this, although people, like everybody has someone they love pretty much in this country.
Let me stop you right there and ask you, a question, Laura. Because you didn't go from failure, to worse. You went from doing okay to failure. And thankfully you've completed the circle back to happiness and wellness. But are people addicted or experiencing addictive behavior only as a process of being an addictive type nature, you knew what heroin could do to you before you took it.
I
So
I did.
were you an addictive person who heroin came into play for you?
That's
You
a
get the
really good,
question?
yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think you can become addicted to anything. I become addicted to work. I'm currently addicted to sugar-free gum. I think it relieves my
Yeah,
anxiety, right? Like
yeah.
we can become addicted to our coping skills. Some are healthier than others. Not all will lead to stealing from people you love or
You're the
overcrowd.
breakfast tea. You're the
Yeah,
breakfast tea.
yeah, or will lead to overcrowd, become the front door of mass incarceration. But um, I think for me it's a combination of nurture and nature. I think I have a genetic predisposition, and I think I grew up in a way where I developed a skill early on to process my internal world and my feelings, which was writing. And when I stopped writing, I like to say I was a late bloomer to addiction, because I swore I would never do that and be like X, Y, and Z in my family. And I lost a brother and a sister to addiction, to alcoholism and addiction and overdose. So I knew these things intellectually. And so I think it was a combination of, I didn't have any coping skills, right? It was also like, when I stopped processing my internal world, my pain, and I took a legitimately prescribed Vicodin long before the opiate crisis was a crisis, and it lit up my brain. And I said, oh, everything can be okay. Really, what it helped me do, I was addicted to pretending everything was okay and I was fine when I wasn't. And that those pills helped me do that. That's my particular thing. I think what's hard for people to understand is I very much had a strong moral compass, a right and wrong, who I am at my core. At my core, I'm a generous person. Like, what do you need? I will help you and give it all to you. But who I was in the compulsion of addiction, where I thought my very survival depended on that opiate, is completely opposite. And to hold those two things in your mind is very hard, and you become very self-obsessed and self-centered and selfish in a compulsion of addiction. And it's really hard to reconcile for people, because I love my children so much. I would throw myself in front of a train to save their lives. I could not stop on my own that addiction because I love them. I had to be stopped. That was a great gift. When I say people need to learn things the hard way, for me, uh, I had this carefully constructed facade of success and fitting in.
And it looked like
It
what?
looked like I had a house in a cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood. I drove a minivan. My kids went to private school. I had a business. I had the outward trappings that I had it all together, that I had succeeded in this definition of success, and I was perfectly playing the role that I had thought I needed to play in the world. I am the
Hmm.
perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect neighbor, the perfect this, that, and that. And I was miserable. And never once had I stopped to see if it was perfect for me. Right. So I was kind of living this pretense, like pretending in any area of my life where I say yes when I mean no. Like, that is my trigger. That is my slippery slope to addiction. It's been 16 years, but I had to get all of that taken away in a really horrible, harsh way to sort of become me, right? And I'm sorry that my journey to becoming me is collateral damage, right, to my children. It's their college essay topic. No one mom wants that, right?
Right. You know you're talking to somebody very specifically right now in our family. Somebody's listening and you're speaking very specifically to them. In your book, The Many Lives of Mama Love, you're brutally honest about the past as you are now. How did you find the courage to own your story? And you
Mhm.
own it so completely and you share it so transparently.
Thank you. Deciding to do this book, I said the only way I'm going to do it if I'm going to be honest, like really honest, not hustle honest, not because I can razzle dazzle with 26 letters, like make you think I'm being honest, but really be honest. And the only reason to do that, to put yourself to do that, is in the hopes that, even as a cautionary tale, or an inspiration, it will help others. And there was so much freedom in it. It took me a long time, to be honest. I was in so much shame post release from my incarceration and so scared the world would judge me and was judging me because I was judging myself very harshly. And it was over 11 years of kind of shame and isolation and worried that, people are going to find out I was bad. That's really that was my whole internal struggle, my whole life, honestly, if like, not to get on your therapy couch, but this, can I prove to myself and the world that I am more good than bad, especially after blowing up.
What had happened to your inner child? And you're familiar with the term inner child, right?
Mm-hmm.
What had happened to your inner child that such bruise and um, uh, uh, um, such care was needing to be given at that moment? Because you come along.
Yeah, if there's been criticism of my book, it's that I did my entire past in childhood in like 2 paragraphs about. And I did that for a reason because, one, it was really important to me that I was the only villain in my story, in my book. I really wanted to be the only villain. And I know people want to know, like, what is the formula? What is the formula that's going to turn my, occasional wine nights to alcoholism, or my, like, oh, it feels good to get a little recreationally high, to addiction where I'm going to do these things? Is it trauma plus this plus that? So I didn't want to give that formula because it's different. For me, I grew up in a house where there was a lot of chaos and violence. I was very much alone from an early age. I was hyper independent. I had which is a can become a superpower later, right? I threw myself into school. I was very chameleon like. I could adapt to other people's families and who they wanted me to be. And I did that so I had family, so could eat dinner. I kind of, it's like that old Leave It to Beaver show. If you're of a certain age, where you're sort of ingratiating yourself into other people's parents, and in school I could get praise and attention, and specifically for writing. And so I leaned into that. But, the best way to describe my family growing up was when my sister died, when she, as a teenager, she was extreme alcoholic. No one ever mentioned her name again the minute she died. But outwardly, it was like, we're such a close family. We're such, like there was this sort of dual thing, which is really confusing as a kid, right? It makes you think you're a little bit crazy. And so I became very hyper vigilant to people's actions and words, and very good at assimilating, right? Very good at like fitting in places. And when you fit in everywhere, you learn to fit in everywhere, then you don't actually know who you are, right? Because you're just so good at hustling your way into anywhere and feeling like you belong. So I was really invested in from my childhood, in people liking me, right? I was really invested in that sort of external validation, which is not uncommon.
I think that's so true for so many of us, perchance the majority of us. And years ago, when I had the beautiful occasion to speak with the Dalai Lama, he told me that what people are looking for is happy. And many people identify happy by, if they like me, I must be good. And so I'm happy. Later, that can iterate into different things, but we carry that with us, and not understanding oftentimes that what they are seeking from you, or what you want, what they're admiring in you, is not necessarily a characteristic that you independently would be happy with.
Mm-hmm.
You said your family had a facade of happiness, of everything working really well. That created loneliness for you in the middle of a family?
I would say profound loneliness.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
I did a lot of work before I wrote the first draft of my book. With nonfiction books, some listeners know and don't. You sell the book from proposal, and then you have a year to actually write the book. And so I did a lot of work internally to sort of access those emotions. And I was trying to remember things in my childhood. And one of the things that work brought up, that internal work brought up, was this understanding of how I learned really early on that I was safer alone. And somehow this became this story in my head that I'm so independent and I don't need anybody and I don't need any help and I'll never ask for help. And it just wasn't true. I think that's like the greatest thing I've unlearned in my adult life in my 50s, is that I don't need anyone, and that there's this weakness to asking for help. Now I have a feeling today. If I have a feeling after we get off this, I will call 27 people and talk about it. Totally different way of living my life. It took me a long time.
And you're bringing that in care to other people. I mean, you're a prison reform advocate now, and you're working to change a system that you experienced firsthand. You're lovely. You are outgoing. You're all those things that actually put in front of people to say this is what success looks like. And it is what success looks like where you are now. But what made you decide to not just survive the experience you went through to get here, but to turn it into a mission to help others? And I'm speaking specifically now around prison reform.
Yeah. Well, just as I said, the only reason to do the book was to help others. I knew, and this is long before Oprah got involved, but I knew that I would have a little bit of a big microphone when the book came out. It was a big deal with Simon Schuster. I knew I'd have a big microphone for a while, and I wanted to do some good with that big microphone. And so I started about a year after I finished the first draft book, about a year before I came out, co-founding a nonprofit called the Gemma Project, with Cynthia Chase, and it's gender and trauma responsive services for women. Fastest growing incarcerated population is women. 80% of women in jail are mothers of minor children like me. And
Right.
I never cared about incarcerated women until I became one, right? It never even crossed my mind in my community groups, and here's the thing that it's really hard for people to understand is 80% of those women are mothers. 100% of them love and desperately want to be with their children.
We had very distorted ideas about what incarcerated women looked like, where they came
Mm-hmm.
from, and who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And very few of us ever believed they could be the woman next door, right?
Right. And I think, 100% have histories of trauma, or, as adults or children. And they're in an environment that is very traumatizing. And here's the crazy statistic. If you are an incarcerated woman, you're 30 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than a non-incarcerated woman. And this is not by the women you're locked up with. And the minute you are arrested, maybe not even convicted, your credibility is gone. Everything you've been before that moment is gone in this culture. Your credibility is gone, your believability. So you have nowhere to run. You're in a place where you're locked up for your rehabilitation and safety in general for society. You're not safe. And it's a huge, huge problem. And it's also still the smallest population overall. So it's really hard to get prisons and jails and the 3,116 jails in this country run by sheriffs to invest budget money. So I'm working to change that. And I think I think a lot of people have seen that there may be just a few questionable life choices away from the same story, or they're people they love. And I think for, every incarcerated woman has a story. They don't all get to tell it. And so I think what's been really a gift is having, the middle of this country, middle class book club moms seeing themselves in this book. And, I went into Chowchilla, the largest women's prison. I've gone in twice now, once with Oprah, once without, to do book club in there. They've allowed the book, and have those women finally feel seen also in the same book. And so I think, I feel a responsibility. I think we all have a responsibility to, when we make our way out of something hard, to help others, and to shift perceptions and biases. And I'm very aware that, I was given the opportunity to go work somewhere and prove my intelligence and work ethic and creativity because it wasn't the first thing that that employer assumed about me. That's a privilege. Before they Googled me and found out about my past. And so it is a battle. Not everyone gets that. And the number one predictor of women going back to jail is not drugs. It's not committing a crime again. It's poverty, right? It's poverty. And I could give you the 10 reasons why a formerly incarcerated woman, all things being equal skill level, is going to be your best employee, right? And so,
Well, that's my line of work. So give them up, give them up. Before
Yeah.
you do, because I do want you to give them up. That's really interesting. And I think it's a story and something that needs to be told. You mentioned Oprah? Did you ever meet Martha Stewart?
I did not meet Martha Stewart. I just watched her documentary, however.
And what did you think?
I liked how unapologetic she was.
Well, I think Martha doesn't believe that there was anything to apologize for, that she really got roped. And a lot of people share that perspective too.
Yeah, I think, in terms of like her incarceration, men and women are treated very different in the criminal justice system. Women are treated way more harshly. There's never a judge who will look at a male defendant in a courtroom and say, how could you do this as a father? Who is taking care of your children? Like, that does not happen. Women get that all the time. They're held to a different standard.
Yeah, even to our history with women and prostitution, the women get locked up, not the men. So
right. Yeah, and I think I had a male co-defendant with my ex-husband, same exact charges, same exact sentence. He had his record cleared automatically 8 years ago. He didn't have to pay back our joint and several restitution. I had to. He did not. I'm a rule follower. I had a lot of felonies, but in general, I'm someone who give me the rules and I will follow them. He didn't have the same path and struggled for a lot of years after, and was treated very differently. And he had a very different attitude. He was very angry about it. I was just like, I'm bad. Give me all the punishment. I deserve it. Because it's hard to advocate for yourself when you're in shame, right? So, especially, when you think of those moms in courtrooms and in jails, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of regret, there's a lot of guilt as mothers, and it's really hard to advocate for yourself in what's fair. And so, I just had to go to a hearing to get my record expunged 16 years later. I had to write letters. I had to show up in court and, prove myself all over again. And that was hard and triggering 16 years later. But
you are a prison reform advocate. What are the main issues in the United States prison system that you want to see changed or addressed?
I think there's a fundamental belief, there's a fundamental value, I think, that we have to decide as a society, as a culture. Do we believe in rehabilitation or not? Sometimes it's that simple. Do we believe in second chances or not? Do we believe in it in theory or in practice? In theory, there's a lot of wonderful, well-meaning people who believe in that and will support that and might donate to that, but they don't want they don't want that living next door. They don't want that in their play groups or in their businesses. And if we don't actually let people's sentences end, this is how generations pay for a crime. I pled guilty to 32 felonies as a plea deal. I would have pled guilty to 1,000 if it meant I could go without seeing my children for decades. The reality and I paid back $19,000 in restitution. The reality was I stole $900 total. I paid back $19,000, and I would have paid back $1 million, right? I would have done anything, right? So I have no regret about that. But when I took my youngest son's in college, he was 4 at the time of my arrest, almost 4. And I'm going to get emotional. I just took him, he started at UC San Diego. And it was, 15 years post incarceration, where I'm dropping him to college. And that was the first moment I feel like I exhaled since my arrest, where I said, we did it. Because statistically, he's more likely with 2 incarcerated parents to be in prison himself, not at UC San Diego with a 4.0 GPA, not, so that was the moment where I was like, oh, I'm fighting for generations not to pay for my crimes, my addiction, my, way of learning things the hard way. And that was the first moment. It's been a big year for good and bad this year, and I just had to sell my house. And here we are 16 years later, I've written 6 New York Times bestsellers. I've sold my house, and I'm suddenly panicked that I'm going to have to go through a property management company to rent a house. They don't care that, Oprah thinks I'm nice, they don't care, who the Dalai Lama said this or that about me. So it's so triggering, and it's so like, oh my gosh, what if I can't find a place to live? Like, it's frightening. And so I think as a society, just to get back to your question, that was very long-winded, and I'm sorry, like, are we going to let people pay for their crimes or not? And if we are, then we need to let them. I needed my sentence to end. It's taken 16 years. I think it's okay for it to end without me having to prove anything. Or maybe I proved something. I shouldn't have to. People shouldn't have to, and I didn't know that. I thought, okay, I'll follow the rules, I'll do my time, and then I'll start over. Because the minute I decided I was going to live, that I was not going to give up with this imploding of my life, because I imploded my life in a huge way, in my family's life and people I cared about in my community. And the minute I decided that I was going to get back up, and it was a decision, it was a hard decision. Well, then I was like, okay, let's do this. That's how I am. I'm like, I'm not giving up, then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go big. And I think, part of the problem too is we want people to succeed, but not too well sometimes. Like rehabilitate.
Help yourself, but
Don't rehabilitate better than me who didn't need to rehabilitate. Like there's a lot of things like that going on. And again, when you're in shame, you're never going to say that. I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago. I can say that now, so that I think, letting people pay, letting people not have the worst thing they've ever done or the worst version of themselves be who they are forever. Like, we have to grant other people the same grace we would want and compassion that we'd want granted to ourselves, and vice versa, right? I have to forgive myself as much as I would forgive you for anything. You could tell me anything you did, and I'd be like, oh, there's a context, there's a story that's understandable, So it's a journey to do that for yourself. For me, it was anyway.
And sometimes that journey it's never ending. It's never ending.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get that list. You said you got a list of 10 reasons why previously incarcerated women can make some of the best employees.
I might have embellished the 10, but one, you want someone who already knows crime doesn't pay, right? You want someone, like, honestly, like, I'm no criminal. If I were a criminal mastermind, I never would have gone to jail. I'm not. I used my friend's credit card that did not belong to me, and I put in my own phone number for a club card discount. That is not criminal mastermind behavior, right? That's craziness. I think really what encompasses all of it is that when you have people who have lost everything, who are desperate for the world to see them as valuable again, who are long to feel valuable themselves, they will work so hard to prove themselves valuable. They will work so hard to honor the trust you have in them. That's how I was. I made this joke one time with my editor at Simon Schuster. I was like, should my next book be how to use your trauma responses to succeed in business? Because I was so desperate to prove myself valuable and worthy to myself and to the world that I would have, I did. I helped build one of the biggest nonfiction agencies in the world because someone believed in me, and I was never going to let them down. I wanted to be the person that someone else believed in. And that's really when you have all things being equal. Obviously, I had writing skills. I had skills in my former life and a master's degree already. But all things being equal, when you give people a chance, when you believe in them, I really do believe they'll rise up to that level, especially moms, single moms. Long before I was arrested, I used to have a business and I would hire single moms, right? Because I was one for a long time. And I think when you're fighting for a better life for yourself and your children, it's a certain there's a certain fearlessness that comes from that you want an employee, right? There's a certain like willingness, not to exploit that, but there's a way in which like there's a motivation to work, there's an honesty. You know, there's a million ways that people steal from each other. Some are prosecuted, some are not, right? And so I think, you know, that's really the reason. I believe that people rise up to the level in which you believe in them.
I believe that as well. We run the same line on a lot.
Yeah.
Your
And I
book
want to
title.
believe it. I want to be someone who believes that also, whether it's
Yeah,
naive at times or not. That's who I am and want to be in the world.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was about to mention your book title, The Many Lives of Mama Love. Now, it comes from a nickname that you were given in prison, and I'm curious about it. In a place where people often lose their identity, you gained one that stuck. Tell us about
Yeah.
becoming Mama Love.
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I think when you are incarcerated, you become a number, and uh, there's a whole system that is trying to remind you that you are less than nothing, with no name. You know, and in all the ways that happens. And you know, I was a mom of four. I've always had someone with a lot of mom energy. I was without my children for the first time. Um, my oldest son, Dylan, was 17 at the time I said my youngest son, Caden, was almost 4. My best friend in jail was 19. She was 2 years older than my oldest son. And so I was a mom with a lot of mom energy, and there's a lot of young, you know, I was not that old at the time, but I was like the elder in there also because I was not in my teens and early 20s. Um, and again, who I am at my core without those drugs that make me selfish and self absorbed and all of those things is I like to help. You know, I like to help. And so that's kind of who I became. I started ghostwriting. I started writing again without the drugs. I started writing again and writing letters to help the other women get, you know, sentenced to long-term treatment instead of prison, to get a pass to go to a funeral or a graduation. You know, I'd write letters to the judge as them. I'd hear their story like a ghostwriter does, and then write as them. And it felt good to be writing again. It was like, oh, this is how I add value. This makes me feel valuable. I got, you know, like you would at work, but I got paid in bear claws, which was delicious, right? Um, yep. And probably a crime to write as other people to judges, but I was doing it. It was a crime for good. And I felt valuable again. I broke up with some people. I did all of those things, but I got that nickname Mama Love because of that mom energy. And everyone kind of has a nickname in there given by your female colleagues, right? Or it's so you're, you know, it's a nickname on the streets. You know, I wasn't, you know, I was on a cul-de-sac street, so I didn't. Mom was my nickname before that. So that was my nickname, and it kind of it stuck. And I get called that a lot now by random people and by people who knew me back then. And, you know, I'm a literary agent, so authors I represent call me that too. And, you know, it wasn't the original title of my book, I will say, however. When my book sold, it had a different title, and then it got changed in the process of working on the book to the title it is now. But originally, the title I originally wanted for the book was The Neighbor from Hell and Other People I Have Been. And, you know, that was the title it sold to, and then it got changed because the CEO of Simon Schuster, Jonathan Karp, said, no one wants to hang out with a neighbor from hell. And I said, well, that's the point of the book. It was right to change it. I'm glad. At the time, it felt like, you know, when I was sentenced, my face was on the front page of the local newspaper, and it had that headline calling me the neighbor from hell. And, you know, I like to think I'm a very nice neighbor, actually, but I had so much shame around that article, and it was so embarrassing to my children. You know, my son Ty was in junior high, and that was like in every classroom that day, you know, and I had 2 boys in high school. Like it was public humiliation and shaming, which I just do not think lead to rehabilitation in any way. But for me, it was a way to kind of reclaim this thing that I was so afraid for so long people would Google and find out. This is what I was afraid they would see, that article. And and so I liked that title originally, and I think The Many Lives of Mama Love is a better one. It was the right choice. to change
I
it.
like it. And in saying hello to you a few minutes ago, the love that emanated from you. I mean, you had your arms outreached, and I get it. You established a community or became a part of one and elevated a community that you found in prison. How did those relationships challenge what you had believed about yourself and others? How did they challenge? How did they help?
Mm. You know, it's interesting. Like I think people who are in a common, especially if it's a hard thing, like you're in this shared experience, what differences we had before we got into G Block were put aside because we're all going through this shared experience together. And the women in there saved me. Like I didn't know, I didn't know about my son being caught in the child protective system. Like they educated me in a way that the county wasn't. Like I was getting no information, assuming the worst. Um, we took care of each other. A lot of women are in jail. They're detoxing. It's an addiction. It's a health crisis, a mental health crisis. So we took care of each other, and those relationships become really close. Like you form a community and a family wherever you are, with its struggles and power structures and hierarchies. But at the core of it, I was never afraid of the women I was locked up with, and they certainly were never afraid of me. I've only ever thrown a head of lettuce at someone in my life, but together we were afraid of the system we were in and getting each other through. I was far more afraid of the system and the people controlling our lives in there than I was of the women I was with. What's interesting is, when you get out as a felon, you can't hang out with other felons. So that support group you may have, you can all get out on the same day. You're not allowed to be around each other. That support is gone, right? It's a probation violation. So I think, it's interesting, since the book came out, I've been in touch with, some of the women that have read the book and reached out that I'd lost track of, apart from the few that were doing okay, and some have died because, 16 years ago, fentanyl wasn't a crisis like it is now. So, but one woman from the book it was scary and not that nice in my story, Princess, she got out of prison, like got an MBA, is killing it in marketing in Silicon Valley, bought a house. And I was like, yes, and a lot of women want to go in the helping profession. There's some women in G2 particularly who are doing great, and drug and alcohol counselors, but it's just about opportunity. And then there's a mother and daughter who are in there that I wrote about, who I was in there with, who said, this is the nicest home we've had together. Both have since died of a drug overdose. So it is really, it's one thing to, have services when you're in there. And then when you get out, no one should go back to jail because they don't have transportation to it, to be at 3 places at once. This is what I didn't know. I would see a woman go out, we'd have a big goodbye party. She left full of aspirations. I'm going to go back to school. I'm not going to hang out. I'm going to break up with my drug dealer boyfriend. I'm going to repair things with my family. I'm going to move out of town where I'm, all of the things to turn her life around. And a week later, she'd be back in the reds, arrested and back in. And I used to think, oh, how is she so stupid? I'm not proud of thinking that, but I thought that, right? Because I didn't know. I didn't know how easy it is until I got out, how easy it is to go back for reasons that have nothing to do with committing a crime. I had a drug test at 3 different agencies for the same county. Think about how hard it is to get a job in general after a break, right? Then it's how hard is it to get a job with a criminal record. But get a job with a criminal record when you don't have childcare, but you're mostly a single mom. And it's a job where you can leave on a moment's notice up to 3 times a day to go drug test, or you go back to jail, right? It's almost impossible. I had a car that would not go uphill, so I was like, how do I get uphill? There's all these illogical consequences and ways in which we are assuring people go back for reasons that have nothing to do with committing a crime or hurting anyone else, right? So I can't get, if I have a drug conviction, I can't get cash welfare. And it varies by county, right? So I'm trying to feed my child. This is what drives people to do desperate things. Because, if we need to feed our children, we're going to steal. If our children are going to go hungry and it's stealing, show me someone who's not going to steal something, So there's just like all of these things. That's why poverty is the number one reason. And when you're unsafe, when you don't have safe housing, when you can't get legitimate housing, you're in underground housing. But you need housing to get your children back. You need housing to meet probation or parole requirements. When women get out of the prison, get released in Los Angeles County, the prison puts them on the bus. They give them a clear plastic bag with their belongings. If you go to the bus stop in downtown Los Angeles, there are predators there watching for that clear plastic bag, because these are women who are ripe to be re-victimized. They're right there at that bus station, ready to be to human traffic, to prey on their desperation, to prey on their like lack of community. And so it's so easy to go back for reasons that have nothing to do with doing anything wrong ever again. And it's scary, and it's really, really hard. And we create these, you know, I could write a book as a ghostwriter for 2 Stanford professors. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller. But I couldn't homeschool my child because of my criminal record. But I'm smart enough to be Stanford. You know, like, it's illogical consequences and unnecessary barriers. And that's why I say, like, as a society, with our laws, with, you know, our hiring practices, with our rental practices, like, do we believe in rehabilitation or not? And if we don't, let's just say that. You know?
Does prison rehabilitate in your experience and from your perspective?
No.
What happened with the women who were successful, who bought homes in Silicon Valley, who stepped forward and are talking with me today? What happened in their progress that's not happening because of the prison system? We call it kindly the rehabilitation system.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say what happened in every person's story. I would say with close to 100% certainty that at least they had at least one person who believed in them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, that can change everything. They
Well,
had
you're
one
right.
person who was willing to see beyond that criminal record.
Well, you're writing and you're speaking to save others as well as yourself. Um, how do you view your writing process?
Mm, it's interesting. I love to write. And, you know, before I did my book, I had written, you know, 13 books as other people. And so for me, the process, it was hard for me to figure out my own voice at first. But writing is how I make sense of the world, internally, externally. It's fun. It's not that serious. You know, I have no patience for any pretentious writers. You know, we're rearranging 26 letters over and over again. It's not life or death. It's not brain surgery. But what I love about writing is it gets me in that flow state. You know, it gets me in that zone. When I was working on the draft of my book, there's some, you know, a little bit of woo-woo things that felt like they were happening, and time was not passing. I'd finish a whole chapter and I'd be like, how did an hour go by? You know, some things when you're in that state. And I think for me, I love to make people feel with words. I love to make them laugh and cry, ideally in the same paragraph if I can. You know, I love it. There's nothing that gives me that sort of, it's the best. It's better than any drug in the world. One, being honest is better than any drug in the world. And, you know, writing honestly and just sort of expressing yourself, regardless of, you know, what's going to happen with it at the other end, because we don't know. No one knows. But,
And you get to decide whether or not you're going to publish. I think there's a security and a safety that encourages and allows for honesty, because you really do get the chance to say, no, I'm not going to publish this. My definition of success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And I borrowed that it was gifted from Earl Nightingale to many people. I don't know if you're familiar with who Earl Nightingale is, but I learned a lot through so much of his writing. And along my journey, I found out that an element of success is that it's not just what we achieve, it's who we become during the process of achieving that. Michelle Obama wrote about becoming. Becoming requires us to face truths about ourselves that aren't always comfortable. Most of the time, they're not comfortable, right? Otherwise, why write about it?
right.
What truth did you have to face about yourself before you could have real healing begin, as it appears that writing has been a healing process for you?
Mm. Oh my gosh, there's so many things I had to face. You know, one of the gifts of my incarceration is that when you have every identity that you've created, every role gone, you know, I was given the gift of becoming me for real, right? And even as a mom, you know, losing everything for me made me a better mother, made me a better writer, a better employee, a better friend, because I became more real. I was not trying to fit in anywhere. I was not trying to belong. And it took a long time, and I had the joy of working with a lot of authors on books, neuroscientists, where I learned about neuroplasticity. Like, what are the messages I'm giving myself every day? Even saying I'm an addict every day, like, it's good to know that, face that truth so you can deal with it. But like, what are the messages I'm grooving into the neural pathways in my brain? I wrote a book with Archbishop Desmond Tutu about forgiveness. I didn't know how to forgive myself. I could forgive other people. I had the gift of working with all these people, and it's always a gift of looking back, being like, oh, I pulled this from this book and this from this book, and the Dalai Lama taught me this. But I think the truth, like one of the big truths that I had to learn is that when you're, and Brene Brown, like, can teach everyone better about this better than I can. But when you really learn something, when they're like, oh, I feel that, is this idea that, like our vulnerability is strength, that the thing I'm afraid, if people know the real me, they're going to run screaming out of the room. And what happened when I was brave enough to just be me in all my messy glory some days, the opposite happened. People felt safe enough to run towards me, and people tell me all their secrets. I've got DMs of everybody's secrets in the world because people are desperate to be seen and known. And I think we can have the world look at us in some kind of facade that we're, here, look at me juggle. Look at my cul-de-sac house. But we know we're hustling ourselves in the world. We know we're not being seen for who we are. And so there is no better feeling, I think, to be seen. And there's no better gift than to really see someone as they are and accept them.
So where was a better, honest environment? Inside prison or outside prison before prison or outside prison after prison? And I'm guessing that before prison outside and after prison outside were kind of different for you.
We're very different. I would say inside was better than that cul-de-sac suburban life. And I would say now is the best ever, because I think I finally feel free now, and I feel more me than I've ever been. And
you've got a son coming home from college.
I got my three. I want to say, you're talking about success, and I don't know if you know this, but you taught one of my sons about success. So when I got
tell me.
When I got the invitation to be on your podcast, I was like, how do I know this woman? How do I know this woman? So my son Cody, my second oldest, who he lived this story also. All four of my boys did, and they're, I'm biased, but they're amazing young men and wonderful. He went to film school, and he and his childhood friends did a documentary trying to figure out what success means to them in their 20s, and they interviewed you for one of the episodes. So my son Cody Love had showed me your episode at one point and spoke so highly of you and what he learned from you. So this felt like such a wait, he learned that. You're teaching my son about success, because I taught him how to fail spectacularly, right? And then I've taught him about how to get back up. But you gave him that gift to teach him about success, and so this just feels like a very
what a gift you're giving me in this
moment. So I just want to say thank you to you. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, to say thank you as a mom to you.
This is
people can buy my book, not buy my book, but thank you from one mom to the village that is helping raise my son. You were part of that village. That might be overblown, but I really do feel that. So thank you.
Oh wow. Listen, can you feel this hug that I'm giving you right now? Oh, what a gift you're giving me. Wow.
I made myself cry.
You know what? We have family listening right now, and many of them are experiencing this moment, which is a joyful moment that you and I are having. And thank you for sharing that with me. And thank you for having a wonderful son. A lot of the people listening right now, Lara, are battling their own addictions, and they're feeling trapped by their own struggles. And many of them are happy on the outside, successful on the outside, diligent, faithful, all those things. But they're going through some struggles that might be relationship based. It might be seeking dreams that are so out of reach for them, whatever it is, what can you share with them, with our family listening right now, about finding that first step forward, especially when you're feeling stuck? This is the time of year. We're talking with each other in front of a holiday and a holiday season for many
Mhm.
people. And I believe it's a time of year when most people reach their bottom or are at their most vulnerable. It's a time of year when the most suicides occur. Women
Mhm.
are abandoned. The Genesee home that we support gets filled to overflowing this time of year. We could go on, but
Mhm.
what can you share with them um, about taking a first step toward their own freedom, their own
Yeah.
success?
Yeah. I think, the first step with anything is just being honest with yourself, right? I so good at lying to myself. I thought I was good at lying to others, just so good at lying to myself, telling myself it wasn't that bad. It's okay. I could fix it tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. And then I ran out of tomorrows. I didn't think I could ask for help. If I could change anything, it's hard to have regret because, again, when you rear view mirror, you're like, here's who I am today. This happened, this happened. But I do have this regret that I was not brave or strong enough to simply ask for help and admit that I needed help and that I didn't have my what together, right? Like I was so afraid. I lived every life in fear. And when I was incarcerated, I remember telling myself, if I get through this, I will never be afraid of anything again, ever. Because one of the things one of the things that really stuck with me, one of the gifts of incarceration was, some of the books I read really saved my life in there, got me to quiet my mind, got me to learn to meditate. Um, but it was this message that I got that said, pain pushes until vision pulls, right? And I had to think, and I like, if I ever get a tattoo of words, I might do that. But it was like, I let pain push me my entire life. Pain was pushing me in my addiction. Pain pushed me. Pain pushed me. No one who's addicted for real is happy. No one wants that. And I think being brave enough to have someone safe to ask for help, and then it's our job when people ask for help genuinely to not judge them, and even if they're not asking for help, and I do believe that I had to be stopped in my way. Not everyone does. I used to say I couldn't, I can't admit this, that I'm struggling with addiction, because how could I possibly be away from my children for 30 days and go to rehab? How could I possibly do that? That's impossible. And then look what happened, and so I think things will always get worse. I believe addiction progresses. The thing you think you'll never get to, you will get to. The thing that you think will never happen, it will happen. The thing you think you'll never lose, it will lose. And if you're lucky to be given the gift to have the chance to get the other side, is not guaranteed. People die every day, and so it calls for an inner strength or bravery, or like help is a powerful prayer. If you pray, help. And I do think that people are fundamentally good and they want to help, and they're fundamentally forgiving and they will help, and there's lots of good people in the world who will help, and organizations, and and to find those people. But it takes such bravery, such a brave thing. I was not brave enough.
You said something, because everywhere I go in the world, and I've been to country after country after country, over 52 countries, and people have this perspective of America as a nation that gives, right? We are givers, and maybe we are, but you said something earlier that made me think we are givers. We just don't want the people who need us to be next door.
Hmm.
We don't want them to be the people living next door, right?
We want
And
to
then
give.
we're finding,
We want to be good at a distance.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We want to
yeah,
be good
yeah,
so people know we're good, but at a
yeah,
distance.
yeah. We're afraid of people who need help if we know them, right?
Hmm.
Um, you also were talking, and for a moment, I was hearing the community that you helped elevate, that I think already existed in prison. You came into a community. I've heard from people, I don't know that I've heard this from anyone who's been in prison, but I've heard from people that prison is a very racist environment and a very segregated environment. What's your perspective on that? And do you think that's behavior brought in? Do you think it's encouraged by the system that you're advocating change around?
I think that it is still 1950 in most correctional facilities. I think that there's nothing done to change that, and it's an organizational thing for safety. People forming their like safety groups, but it was. I grew up in, where I was arrested is a progressive town in California. And I thought, oh, there's no racism, like, from my blind way of saying that, I recognize. But it was like, segregation was alive and well, and it was the deep South in facilities. And there was lots of rules and, and classifications and people, divided in this way by the system itself. And partly because they want to create what they think will be less problems. The people running the prison want less problems. So we're going to put all the white inmates here and all the black inmates here and all of this gang here and all this gang, and we're going to make sure everybody knows how separate and different they are because we want less conflict. So the system is built that way. And again, it's more of a system than the individuals in there. And then also any jail or prison is a demographic of its state, of its county, of its city. So yeah, but that was surprising. I read about that in the book, that it was like this class system and this segregation. I worked on a book with a man in Alabama called The Sun Does Shine, and working on that book and spending all those days with him and us being out and going to meals every day and driving around, it was very different from Santa Cruz, California, what I was experiencing. But yeah, the system is built that way and run that way.
There's a man, J.L. Armstrong, who is an associate pastor at a church in Los Angeles, and he's been a personal mentor and spiritual advisor to me for many years, as well as a deep, deep friend. And throughout my life, I've dealt with different things that I couldn't do that I wanted to do. And I shared those with him from time to time, an issue of capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he sat me down one day and he told me that we all have a ministry. And knowing our ministry allows us to fulfill ourselves in our ministry in a different way, in a better way than what I had been doing. And he said, you want to do everybody's ministry. You hear about this, you want to help this. You hear about this, you want to help this. Learn your ministry and become really good at that. That thing we do that's bigger than ourselves, but that is so clear and so purposeful from us. And I do believe that we all have our ministry. And I see you taking darkest chapters from your life and turning them into light for other people inside and outside of incarceration. Lara, when you look now at your future, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think that's a good question. I think when I think about what I want my legacy, I can't, I automatically go to my children,
Mm-hmm.
and I come from a long line of women who kept secrets, generations of women who kept secrets, and had unhealed trauma and passed on a lot of things that weren't great for the next generation. So I think like fundamentally, I want my legacy for my children to be that I stopped, and as messy as it was. I turned and I faced the mirror. I faced the past. I faced all of those women who came before me, and I told the truth, and I owned my mistakes. And I hope I broke.
And didn't villainize others to do it.
I did not.
Or is that, or is that keeping secrets?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I own all my choices. I am the villain and the hero of my story equally, I think. And I'm okay with that. And both things can be true. But I do like to think that I stopped that legacy of my personal family of keeping secrets and pretending and faced it and healed it to the extent that my children, they will know what it looks like to fail spectacularly and get back up publicly, right? They will know they have a resilience story that is their journey. I can't regret that. I feel bad that they were the collateral damage of my learning. But at the same time, I don't know down the line what they're going to look back and be like, thank goodness I went through that with my mom, because this helps me as a parent, or this helps me deal with this. I know that one of the gifts of losing everything, of being locked up, of having to start over, wasn't only just, becoming me. One of the gifts was that there was nothing my 4 boys and all their friends felt like they couldn't talk to me about. That's a gift. Before I went to jail, I was like, I need all my children to go to Stanford because I didn't get there. I didn't get in there. That's the one school that didn't take me. So I need them all to go there, and I need to look good. And that's going to be a measure of success. Now, my conversations with my children are like, is this going to make you happy? My son Ty just moved to Amsterdam. It's hard to have him so far away. But it's like, if this is where you're happy, go there. The rest you figure out. The rest you figure out. Maybe, you can't afford a car, fine. Like the things, the trappings of what you were talking about at the beginning with the Dalai Lama, of like that thing inside is not, it's not out there. It's like, what will bring you joy for no good reason? That's what I call happiness. Joy for no good reason, right? Not because like, oh, look, I got this shiny new water bottle or car, or I get, but it is that sort of internal thing, that internal light. Like that's what I want the legacy to be for my children. Like I don't want them to have to go through the generations of trauma like generations do. And I think I drew a hard line in the sand, and they've been hugely supportive of the book. I had to let them read the book, and I never had access to my mother's internal world. I had no idea what was going on with her, right? They know all of the, everything. I held nothing back. Yeah. And, my son Dylan said, Mom, I've always felt close to you, and now I feel even closer. There's a gift in just saying all the things. I want them to say all the things they need to say. That's really simple.
That's really beautiful. And, one of the things I teach is simple doesn't always mean easy.
Yes.
Right. So before we go to 4 for 4, is there anything else you feel compelled to share in this moment?
I don't think so. I think, actually, I would like to share just gratitude for you reading the book, for sharing it, for reaching out, for having this, beautiful conversation before the holy days. I appreciate it because it feeds my soul. And I used to have to take 20 pain pills just to call the utility company. I desperately wanted connection. That's what my addiction was. It was a symptom of me wanting connection, to have deep connection with people, to have conversations, to be brave enough to look someone like you in the eye, say, what can you teach me? What can we talk about that is beyond the surface? And so, it's a gift when I get to do that now. And so thank you. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Well, it's a gift given back from you to me. Thank you so much. Let's go 4 for 4.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you 4 questions to which you'll give me 4 answers. There are no right or wrong answers. And the first one is, you get to invite 4 people to dinner from any time in the past to present. No AI. People.
Okay. And
who's at your table and why?
And they can be deceased or living, or they have to be living.
They can be deceased or living.
Okay. So I would invite Shonda Rhimes because
Because
she is she's an amazing writer, and I want to work with her someday. So I would like to have dinner with her. That's on my,
this may be your pathway to her.
my bucket list, right? I would invite,
You may have just put sand in that bucket.
yeah, I would invite Maya Angelou because she's just wise and I want to listen to all of her wisdom in real time over dinner. I would invite Lucille Clifton. I don't know if you know who she is. She was a poet, and she was a teacher of mine that I had in the 80s and in the mid 80s in
Wow.
college. I didn't
Wow.
know
Wow.
she taught me. I took poetry and children's writing from her. I didn't know I was taking classes from Lucille Clifton when I took classes from Lucille Clifton,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
And she was trying to teach me some things about the world beyond poetry. And she was telling me about some mystical things and about her husband and some magical things that were going on in the world. And so I want to be more present. I want to have those I wish I could have those conversations again, because I didn't know the gift that I was being given till much later. Okay, how do we got? Was that 3?
3.
I would invite my son Cody Love to film it all, because I don't rely on my memory anymore, so he could know the wisdom. I wouldn't forget it, and he could tell his brothers, because I wouldn't remember anything. So
I love that. I love that so much. I love that so much. Okay, what 4 pieces of music are you listening to now? Not podcast music, and why?
Okay, so for dance hype, I'm listening to Chapel Roan Pink Pony Club on repeat. I don't know why. That just makes me feel like anything's possible in the world. I am listening to I love music, and that was one of the things I missed. That hype. So I have 2 go-to hypes. One is Chapel Roan, that specific song right now. Lizzo is always my go-to when I want to dance around the kitchen. When I want to feel, because music like words make me feel, I will go to David Gray, Irish ballads all day to get in my feels, and Adele. Spotify has, they make a day list for you. And, I've been going through it this year up and down. And one day my Spotify playlist, they generate your music based. I think they know your mental health more than you do. And they title it. And the title is the greatest title I've ever seen. It's called Sad Girl Starter Pack, a list of songs. And I was like, sometimes I like to wallow, and I just got to dive into the wallow. So I would say those are the wallow ones.
We used to call it the blues, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love your playlist. I love it, love it, love it. I'm going to share it with, okay? Or you can share it with me.
Okay.
What 4 books do you recommend to our family, and why?
Okay, well, I'm a literary agent, so this is really hard for me to do in an unbiased way. So I'm just going to give.
We're recommending yours. We're recommending yours.
No, not mine, but I represent other authors.
We're recommending yours.
So if I'm gonna look, I love memoir. Not only did I write one, but I love to represent memoir and help people tell their story, because I think there's no better way to hack empathy in this world than for you to be in the mind of someone else and making their choices with them. And the first person, so I'm going to go to Sun Does Shine, which is a little biased, but Anthony Ray Hinton, he's, I spent time with Archbishop Tutu and the Dalai Lama. He's my greatest spiritual teacher is Anthony Ray Hinton. He was 30 years on death row as an innocent man. And he taught me more about gratitude and being in the moment and forgiveness than anybody else in the world. So the Sun Does Shine. It's hard for people to care about incarcerated women. It's not hard for them to care about foster children. Those 2 things are closely entwined. So again, I am this man's literary agent, but the book Safe by Mark Daly is a foster care memoir from the opposite story of mine. And I represented him, and it's a beautiful, funny, actually, story of his journey to becoming, him and his husband's journey to becoming foster parents, and a take on this system that is profoundly broken. I would say In the Shadow of the Mountain, another memoir by Sylvia Vasquez Lovato. And she's the first Peruvian woman to summit Mount Everest and climb all the 7 summits. And she has a profound story about the healing in nature and in community.
Mm, mm.
Um, Amazing. And fourth, I'm going to say there's a book coming out. It's not out yet. And again, I didn't do this book, but it's by Dr. Sunita Saw, and it's called Defy. Comes out in January. And it's the power of no in a world that demands yes. It's a nonfiction book, but it's how to find our true no and stand up and resist injustice. And it's the science of that. She's a professor. It's amazing. So I'm going to recommend that book it'll come out in January, I think, sometime.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. That's a
Mhm.
good pickup list. Thank you. And now we're going 4 for 4. What 4 pieces of advice, and you've given some beautifully thus far, do you have for our family? And if it's advice that was given to you, please pay homage to the author of it.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to give a piece of advice that was given to me. One of my best friends is a former Secret Service agent. Evie Pampouris, she guarded Obama, she guarded Clinton. She has a book out called Becoming Bulletproof. And she said to me, just because someone throws you the ball doesn't mean you have to catch it. And I don't know, she probably didn't invent it, she got it, but that is
I've
really
heard
good
that.
advice. Yeah, all ages, good advice. I think, I don't know, this is, my life advice. I don't know where I got this from, but I believe this is sort of something I believe that kindness is our greatest weapon and the best beauty product on the market. So there you go.
Mm,
Would say
mm,
that.
mm, mm,
Um, I would say that the thing I said earlier about pain pushing and vision until vision pulls, that, I got from Mark Nepo. The Book of Awakening. I know that's 5 books, but it is really a profound, life-changing book. It's one of my favorites.
mm.
Mark Nepo. And that is
Mhm,
that wisdom, this thing where we have a choice. Like, am I going to create a vision for the future, no matter where I am, no matter how low, no matter how impossible, whether it's business or relationship or getting out of prison someday or, getting out of addiction? Like, am I going to create a vision? I'm a big believer in, Delulu daydreaming, right? Like daydream away
mhm,
and let that vision pull you. So I would say that's a piece of advice. How many is that? 3?
mhm.
Um, don't take yourself too seriously. I think that's really good advice.
That is beautiful, and I'm taking seriously everything you've said.
Thank you.
It has been such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And happy holidays, and God bless.